It's time for College Sports Weekly. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Bill Hazen. The winning story of undefeated Minnesota continues for another week. The Gophers bumped Penn State from the ranks of the undefeated in Minneapolis. Coach P.J. Fleck explains how it was done.
We knew that we had to be able to play our style of football. There was nothing different about it. It had to be us. We didn't have to do anything different. We just had to be able to do it better than we did the week before. I know that sounds cliche and coach speak and gimmicky, but at the end of the day, it's really not. It's just how you win football games. Since January, we've been talking about this word pressure. And all the players wrote down on a piece of coal last night, which signified carbon, what pressure has taught them since January. And they put it all in this big bucket. And overnight, it turned to this diamond. I don't know if it turned that fast, but we said it did. And that's what they are. They're diamonds.
And that's some of what's happening. Here's what's coming up on College Sports Weekly. Minnesota isn't the only team still among the ranks of the undefeated in college football. Surprising Baylor continues to pace the Big 12. And there are a number of other big stories awaiting the commentary of the High Plains drifter of college football, John Jenkins. Did Willie Taggart and Chad Morris deserve quick pink slips? Rex Lardner will tell you when we talk shop. How is the turbulent landscape of college football affecting college football ratings? We'll look it over with Cody Kellner and his Kellner ratings. And Gene DeLisio updates football rankings on the small college beat. That's all ahead on College Sports Weekly.
When I was little, we could talk about anything.
I still want you to talk to me.
When I was little, you taught me to follow rules.
I still want you to guide my life.
When I was little, we laughed and played.
I still want us to have fun together.
When I was little, you gave me hugs.
I still could use a hug once in a while.
When I was little, you told me you loved me every day.
I still want to hear those words.
When I was little, you were my hero.
I still want to look up to you. You're my parent, and I'll always need you.
No matter their age, your children never stop counting on you. Stay close to your kids. Stay connected. Visit parenting.org for helpful resources or call the Boys Town National Hotline at 800-448-3000 for free parenting advice.
Hi, this is Bill Hazen with great news. We're growing, and now it's easier than ever for you to keep up with Bill Hazen Productions and the popular radio programming we produce. First, there's our website, BillHazenProductions.com. If you miss a program or part of a program, just go to the site and listen. The current edition of all of our programs is right on the front page. Also, meet the special people who form our broadcast family and make our programs possible. Want to know about guests and topics we'll discuss on our shows? Then join our Twitter feed at Bill Hazen Pro, where you can be part of the conversation and share your thoughts on our programs. So we invite you to join us and enjoy America's most innovative sports broadcasts. You'll find them at our new web address, BillHazenProductions.com. Hope you are ready with the laugh meter, because it is time to dig into college football. And for that, we turn to the High Plains drifter, who has found his way drifting from the high plains down to the warm plains in South Florida. You think boy. John Jenkins isn't a smart thinker, ladies and gentlemen?
Oh. I'll tell you what, I'm just on the outskirts of Havana, Cuba, practically, Bill, down here. Just trying to run from that cold weather, buddy. I tell you, here in Florida, I've learned that once you get south of Orlando, you're safe. You're in shorts and T-shirt weather year-round, and that's what I'm encountering. Now, all my buddies all the way out there to the High Plains and to Houston, Texas, and stretching out to Los Angeles and all over the country, we're we've got Arctic blasts going on.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
You bet. You bet. This is record lows, aren't they?
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. But I'll tell you, as cold as it's been, boy, was it red hot in the game between LSU and Alabama. And you know, John, I seem to gather when we talked about this last week, you had kind of a feeling about this game.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling it wired through exactly the way you thought it was going to go.
It sure did. I didn't think that LSU would mount up such a lead, particularly early in the game. I witnessed something from Coach Saban that I haven't seen in him at all, and that was he had a real worried demeanor and concern about himself in that first half when it got 33-13. The body language he had and the expression, he just went into a shell. He had a great, genuine concern on that sideline, wondering if this thing might turn into a 60-21 game or something like that. But I'll say this for him. Hey, they did regather, and they made a run at them in that second half. And my gosh, what if they'd have got the onside kick when it was 46-41?
Yeah.
They would have had a shot. They would have had a shot.
John, is it fair to say that the margin of error for Alabama isn't what it used to be? In other words, they have to play a better game than they had to play 4 or 5 years ago in order to win.
Well, in this case, it was. We talked about this last week. I told all of our listeners around the nation and the world, LSU has been able to match Alabama year in and year out with D linemen, O linemen, linebackers, receivers. Hey, they have an all-out war against each other. Where they've always come up short is the quarterback performance. They've always had guys that I call Bojangles quarterbacks, guys that are freelancing and they bust assignments. And even the philosophy there with Les Miles and Orgeron as well now, he doesn't escape this. He believes in defense and special teams himself. But Joe Burrow got off to such a hot start throwing the football early this season. If they had tried to reel him in and contain him, that fan base would have erupted. So as a result, they let Burrow have this long leash, and he has produced. He's produced, and it looks like he's going to win the Heisman Trophy to me. After a signature win like this, certainly the fine performances he's turned in and week out, he is just a hands-down favorite, I think, to win this thing.
I think we can answer one other question this week, definitely, and that is this, John. Minnesota is for real.
Oh, boy, aren't they? I had an opportunity to really study that game as well. I did see this. I think Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles can see this too, Bill, and that is that Minnesota has got some real talented players. And Coach Fleck has done a great job recruiting there, and he has done a heck of a job coaching these guys. He's got some real interesting motivational pieces that he uses, and those guys played their guts out for him, and they really showed what they were all about, beating a very fine Penn State team.
Wisconsin seems to be rebounding into a pretty good year, John. Add a victory over Iowa at Camp Randall Stadium into that mix. They stubbed their toe with 2 straight losses that really hurt them, but they seem to have bounced back now.
Yeah, that was a good game. Naturally, Kurt France does a great job there at Iowa, and that was not going to be an easy, just gimme win for them. And they did good. Coach Christ, he got those guys up on their hind legs fighting it, and they bounced back and got the win. They're going to finish out with a fine season, go to a real good bowl game. Whereas, earlier in the year, we thought that they may be in the same position they were in 2 years ago, and that's possibly running the table all the way down to that Ohio State game. They're still going to have a good season, and great coaching job being done there.
Well, I'll tell you, as usual, John, I checked out Nikita, and he has a pretty big smile on his face following Tennessee's win at Kentucky. What's going on here?
He's basically dug himself out of the cellar is what's happened. We were talking in the same vein all through the midpoint of the season that it was just incomprehensible that the Arkansas Razorbacks and the Tennessee Vols are pulling up the bottom of the barrel in the SEC, and Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, and Kentucky has escaped it. Well, Tennessee, knowing that they didn't want to go back to the cellar, they rose up and had that big win against Kentucky. And Mark Stoops has done a great job there for 2 years, with the talent he's had and being able to win like he's done. And they're still going to finish out with a good season for Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And but Tennessee did prevail in this one. And that, as you say, Nikita, he feels awfully good now, much, much better. Yeah. Where he doesn't have to get one of his shoes up on the counter and bang it.
Yeah, no shoe pounding on the desk this week. I'll tell you that. You're absolutely right about that, John. Hey, and how about Illinois now qualifying for a bowl game? They knocked off Michigan State, John. They're going to play in a bowl. 37-34 was the final.
Oh, yeah, Lovey. I tell you what, Lovey's gone from who's he to who's who. Once again, he's in good graces again, isn't he?
He sure is. He has that big beard now, and that shows all the wisdom he's accumulated in the 3 years at Illinois, I'll tell you. Well, John, stay right there. We'll come back a little later in the program, and then let's go ahead and dig in on some of the games coming up, all right?
You bet.
All right. Coach John Jenkins from warm southern Florida, the big neighborhood. And we will be back when we return. Rex Lardner joins us from warm Tucson, Arizona. Anybody see a theme coming out of this here? That is next on College Sports Weekly. Let us talk shop once again. Rex Lardner steps in, longtime television sports executive at CBS, NBC Sports, and Turner, a former associate commissioner at Conference USA and predictor of polar vortexes. Even brother, he hit it this time. Rex also consults the broadcast industry, professional sports and college sports entities, and he's with us from Tucson, Arizona, which is well isolated from the polar vortex. But however, Tucson is not isolated from the football silly season, and Rex, here we go. At about this time every year, college football coaches begin to get the axe, and this year seems unusual even by the normal perilous standards. In 7 days, we have now seen 2 major college football coaches fired in their second year. This has never happened before since the current era of college football began. The coaches are Willie Taggart of Florida State, fired after just 21 games, and Chad Morris of Arkansas, fired after just 22 games. Arkansas got drilled by Western Kentucky in Fayetteville, 45-19, and that was that. Anyone who listens to this program knows, Rex, that you have speculated for years that pressures on coaches were going to get worse, and what do you know? Here we are. What does this say about the pressure to win and win fast?
Bill, I think a number of things. The first thing is it's hard to believe that these 2 coaches were fired halfway through their second season. Usually, as we've discussed in the past, you give a major college coach at least 3 years and maybe 4 so that he can bring in his own recruits and kind of clear up the culture of what was left behind. But it shows there's more and more pressure. It's not just, Bill, it's not just the pressure to win. It's the pressure to look good and to have a good crowd there, and all of the social media implications that are on today. And every game is now televised somewhere. So more and more people are able to watch it, and there's more and more pressure. I think, Bill, it's going to get much worse before it gets better.
Yeah, let's take a look at the specifics of the 2 situations, Rex. Let's start with Willie Taggart in Florida State. Taggart succeeded Jimbo Fisher, who had jumped to Texas A&M. And in truth, Rex, we both know this. The Seminoles were losing a little ground while Fisher was still there. Recruiting had fallen off a little. You were in Florida at the time. And Taggart inherited that, to be quite honest. Did Taggart get a fair shake?
No, I don't think he did, Bill. I think they struggled last year, and they're struggling. They're 5-5 this year, and they didn't go to a bowl game last year for the first time in maybe 30 years or whatever it was. But I think it's really unfair to dismiss someone after a year and a half. He doesn't have a lot of his recruits coming in. He inherited maybe, as you speculated, the idea that Fisher had lost a little bit of an edge before he went to A&M. So a combination of reasons indicate that he really was not given a fair shake.
The Arkansas situation, Rex, it seems to me, is a lot tougher. First came Brett Bielema from Wisconsin. Right out of the gate when he took the Arkansas job, he was in trouble for the way that he left Wisconsin. There was a huge controversy there. Then Bielema was a sub-500 coach. He could never get Arkansas over the hump. Chad Morris inherited a big mess and struggled to get the large number of recruits that Arkansas was going to need here. And then came this year's truly embarrassing losses to San Jose State and Western Kentucky, both of them at home. These are two so-called bye games that they lost. Worst yet, there's nobody in the stands, is what you just said. Arkansas was a very heavy lift. It still is. Did Chad Morris get a fair chance?
No, I don't think he did, Bill. Similar to Willie Taggart, I think Bielema left Arkansas with a mess. Morris, needed more than a year and a half to put the program back together. Morris was kind of a legendary high school coach in Texas, and then he became an offensive coordinator, and Bill was the head coach at SMU for a while, too, and had success at all these areas. And I just think he was not given enough time. He's a proven good coach. Arkansas being a mess, and the worst thing of all is that they're losing fans in the stands. And maybe the athletic director felt he had to do something. But I really think you've got to give a coach like that at least 3 years, maybe 4, to get his recruits in the door.
Rex, let's dig into the symptom here and the real problems. Football is the mother's milk of college athletics, plain and simple. If football isn't going right, the financial implications are very troubling. And athletic budgets are sky high, and they're going up. And no matter how much money you throw into that budget, college athletics will spend it. Boy, do we know that. What is the trend here? And will it continue to get worse?
Bill, the trend is more and more money being spent, and it really will continue to get worse. The interesting thing for me, Bill, is the idea of the next round of television negotiations. My sense is that a lot of the major Power 5 conferences will try to expand and get every single game televised one way or another, not just football, but other sports as well. And like you said in the beginning, Bill, football drives everything else. In many schools, it's the only sport that's a revenue producer, from marketing to set ticket sales to boosters clubs and all of that. And so many other sports, including basketball, do not make money at many schools. So it rides everything. I really think with the social media implications today, and everything is out there in the open, budgets are going to grow, and there'll be more and more spending, and I think the trend is going to get worse.
As the stability gets worse, the coaches are going to want more and more money, and that's been the case for a while now. Look at Brett Bielema at Arkansas. It's now reported that the Razorback Foundation, with the support of the University of Arkansas, is stopping severance payments to Brett Bielema. He got his money up front, and his severance calls for roughly $320,000 a month. That's Rex Lardner kind of money there. That's the real stuff. The university accuses Bielema of violating his severance agreement by not pursuing a job hard enough. Bielema's a line coach with the New England Patriots, but he's only getting paid $50,000 a year for that job, and hence Arkansas is on the hook for the rest of it, and they don't like it. What's going to happen here?
Bill, I think the University of Arkansas is going to have to pay it out. Normally in these buyout situations, it's a guaranteed number, and it would be hard to prove what Bielema did and did not do in pursuing a new job. I mean, he's got a job with the Patriots. It doesn't pay a lot. Maybe Arkansas expected him to become a coordinator or a head coach at another major school, so that buyout differential, would be a lot less than $320,000 a month. Can you imagine getting paid $320,000 a month for not doing anything with school. I mean, it's just crazy. I really think Arkansas is not going to win in this situation. I just think it's a matter of judgment whether or not he could have had a higher paying job. And I think that's a matter of interpretation. So I think Arkansas is stuck with the buyout.
This is a part of the mess, and they're just going to have to play through it. The ratings are in on the LSU-Alabama game, and I know you took a look at this one, Rex. The audience for the game was the largest since 2011, up 47% from last year's game. It sounds like football in the South, huh?
It really does, Bill. I think it's interesting. It's the first time in a while that both went into the mid-November game with 8-0 records. They were both undefeated. And it was a terrific game. I mean, LSU led 33-13 at half and just hung on to win 46-41. So you had lots of offense, not a lot of defense, but lots of offense. And it shows you football is a religion in the South. And it shows you when you have two undefeated teams, it's going to get a very good rating. You mentioned, Bill, it's the highest for a college football audience since 2011. That's 8 years.
Wow.
And it shows you what LSU Alabama can do.
Man. Hey, here's a story, Rex. We teased this one from last week. Car racing legend and businessman Roger Penske has shocked the racing world with the purchase of the Indianapolis 500 Motor Speedway, the IndyCar Racing Series, and IMS Productions, both audio and video. Most people saw this strictly as a racing story, but I'm not so sure about this. IMS Productions is a big deal, Rex. Absolute state-of-the-art facilities. They can do just about anything there. Yet, aside from racing, the facilities really aren't fully utilized. Now, add in the fact that the NCAA is only a few miles south of the track. The Horizon League is based right there as well. The Big Ten is about 3 hours away, and you have powerful college programs like Notre Dame, Indiana, Purdue in the state. Do you see any possibilities there?
I do, Bill. I see a lot. I think you have a great point with all of those leagues and teams very close. I wouldn't be surprised if the Motor Speedway bill tries to take a look at the Final Four. Yeah. In other words, maybe lots of concerts, maybe major games involving different schools. It would be neat for the Horizon League to have their tournament there, that kind of thing. I see lots and lots of possibilities. And I think that's what Penske was thinking with the purchase of the Indy Car Racing Series and IMS Production. So my sense is there'll be a lot more events at the track.
Here's another possibility, Rex. IMS can also offer a complete turnkey radio network solution, the same as they use for the 500. Plus, they're right there for any additional production, even a possible audio or video channel originating where the NCAA is based. A relationship with IMS Productions could allow the NCAA to take a lot of its event and production inventory totally in-house. Your thoughts?
Bill, I think it's a natural. I mean, I really do. I think the NCAA is going to gravitate to Penske and the whole situation. It would really help them a lot to have a lot of their NCAA championships close by. A lot of times they farm them out and so forth, and it's done 7-8 years in advance. And I'm talking about everything from wrestling through track and field. But I've got to think that they're going to do a lot of in-house kinds of things. Just like, as I mentioned, conference will do some stuff. There'll be concerts there. I just think they're really underutilizing the facility, Bill, and especially in terms of radio and TV.
What about if they put both feet in the water here, Rex, and decide the NCAA decides they want to go pay video? Then you really are looking for production help, and distribution goes right through the internet anyway.
Bill, that's a great point. It really does. I think the NCAA should really take advantage of that. They're right there. I think they need all the positive publicity they can get. And I just think it just seems like unnatural.
All right. Well, Rex, as always, good to visit with you and keep in the warm weather. And think of us back here, will you, when you're relaxing and enjoying yourself after a tough day of field hockey and whatever else you're doing out there right now.
We're doing tennis. Carolyn, my wife, and I are also teaching elementary school kids golf, floor hockey, and tennis. And it's really a lot of fun.
Well, golf and tennis will keep you in the swing of things, there's no doubt. So you have a good week, Rex.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Good being with you as always.
Good being with you too. Rex Lardner, we talk shop. We'll be back with more of College Sports Weekly.
You don't usually get a stock tip from a 16-year-old, but I'm here to tell you about a different kind of stock. It's called Better Futures, a stock for social change that's not about making money. Instead, you invest to help students like me go to college, which ends up making the future better for all of us. My name is Alicia, and I'm your dividend.
Invest in better futures with UNCF. Visit uncf.org/invest. A mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. Brought to you by UNCF and the Ad Council.
College football ratings are taking center stage right now, and for us, that means a close look at the Kellner ratings. We have Cody Kellner on at this time of year just about every month to review how things are coming along, and he joins us from Waco once again. Cody, I am looking at an Ohio State team on the top of your poll. Each team that is in the poll has a numerical rating which accompanies their strength, if you will, their relative strength. Ohio State's rating, literally, Cody, is almost off the chart. They are doing superbly, to say the least, and they have a considerable ratings lead over the rest of the field. Let's start there. How are they achieving such a great rating in your poll?
Well, first of all, Bill, thanks for having me, but that's a really good question, and the answer to that is right now, Ohio State, in a nutshell, they've defeated 5 teams with winning records so far this year. That's just one less team than what LSU has done this year up to this point. Ohio State's obviously undefeated, but the key thing with them as to what separates them from the rest of the field, from teams such as LSU and Clemson and Alabama, is the fact they're winning by such high margins. So these impressive wins they have are against quality opposition. When you mix them both together, you're going to move well up into the number 1 ranking, such as they have done at this point in the season.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fascinating. Of course, we all saw LSU's great victory at Alabama. That certainly is reflected in your poll. No slouch there. You're right on it. You have LSU as number 3. They have very good strength. They're only a few ratings points behind Clemson. They're in there tightly. Any comments on that?
Well, in regards to LSU, they are 6-0 versus teams with winning records, and that's more than any other team in the country. The interesting thing about Clemson in regards to their strength of schedule is that their strength of schedule ranking is right, I would say, a little bit less than average in comparison to the rest of the nation. But Clemson is winning by larger margins than what LSU has done. So while Clemson's had a much weaker schedule than what LSU has faced at this point in the year, they're making up for it by winning by large margins. Nevertheless, though, at this point in the year, Clemson and LSU, they're about 7 points off, and that's pretty close. That's a pretty close difference in my ratings. So if LSU was to go out and have a big quality win in their next outing, they could move up into the number 1 spot if Clemson was to have another close game.
Cody, we have 2 teams in the top 10 that I cannot remember being there before. I'm absolutely sure one of them hasn't been there. The other one I'm not as sure about, and that's number 7, Utah. That's the one I'm not really sure about. Number 8, Minnesota. I know they have never been this high in your poll, having watched it for a number of years. P.J. Fleck obviously has it going at Minnesota, and Utah has a one-loss year going, and they are really doing a great job here as we go down the stretch.
Oh, exactly. Honestly, I can't recall. I don't think in all my years of doing football rankings, I can't recall Utah or Minnesota, for that matter, being ranked as high. I know Utah has come close over the years to being in the top 10 or being in the latter part of the top 10. But Minnesota's had a really impressive year. They are 3-0 versus teams with winning records. Utah's actually faced 5 teams with winning records up to this point. But the thing about Minnesota is that they're coming off a strong win against Penn State at home. I did have Wisconsin. I think I've had Wisconsin higher ranked than most other polls prior to the game against Penn State. I had Minnesota in my top 12 3 weeks ago. So there were some things that my computer model was seeing in Minnesota early on, even before the big win against Penn State this last week. One thing you may notice with my ratings is that I still have Penn State over Minnesota, even though Minnesota is undefeated and owns the head-to-head. But the reason for the difference is the fact that the rating difference going into that game was so wide, it would be impossible for Minnesota to leapfrog Penn State in my ratings, at least for this week anyway. In regards to Utah has faced some quality opposition, but what's interesting about their schedule is that they have not faced any teams in the current AP top 25. Now, outside of that, they are facing some quality opposition, but what's hurting them is the loss to USC. I think had they not lost to USC, Utah would definitely be a top 5 team at this point in the season.
Yeah. We have seen in the last year or two consistently 1 or 2 group of 5 schools that have been right up there, either in the top 10 or just outside of it. That is not the case this year. You have to go all the way down to 17, and then you have 4 of them lined up in a row. Cincinnati, Memphis, Boise State, and SMU, and then the Texas Longhorns are right below those 4, and then App State is down at 23. All of them are having great years. Any thoughts on them? And to me, it's very interesting. Cincinnati has been playing under the radar for a couple of years here now. They are really quite good.
Oh, they are, Bill. And the thing all these teams have in common is the fact they've been defeating quality teams this year. I think this is going to come into the favor more of AAC schools as we get deeper into the season, because you're going to play each other more, and their strength of schedule is going to be a little bit tougher than that of what Boise State's going to face.
Is there any school that really surprises you one way or the other about their season that perhaps we haven't mentioned?
Well, I would say, first of all, I think Baylor has surprised me. I think for them to come out and be undefeated up to this point in the season really speaks to what Matt Rule's doing there with the program. I think, in my opinion, in the Big 12, when you're Baylor, and I always think those games like at Oklahoma State, I think going into that game this year, Baylor's only won out there in Stillwater just one time ever. And they got their second win ever out there this year. So, and then they won at Kansas State. They've won some tight games against TCU and Texas Tech. I know the Texas Tech game, there's a little bit of controversy, I believe, with that one. But Baylor's had some really tight conference games, and they're finding ways to win. And when that's not going on, they're winning in some really tough venues in conference play. And I think the fact that they're still standing undefeated going into the Oklahoma game really, I think that's pretty special and pretty unique. And I think it's surprising to a certain degree. I think a lot of people thought Baylor would do well this year, but I don't think many would have thought that they would be undefeated at this point in the year. Yeah. And so Baylor is a surprise to me.
Interesting, and right nearby, too. I bet you're hearing it all around Waco with the fantastic season they are having. And, brother, they've struggled there for a couple of years. They've had a rough go. Well, Cody, thank you very much as always. We'll check back in a few weeks and just see how it's going along with the Kellner ratings. Cody, thank you as always.
Hey, Bill, thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure. Cody Kellner of the Kellner Ratings. Check it out for yourself. KellnerRatings.com. www.KellnerRatings.com. When we return, Gene DeLisio covers the small college beat next on College Sports Weekly. Time now for the small college beat, where Gene DeLisio reports no surprises in the FCS rankings. Gene?
Bill, let's begin by checking the FCS football rankings for this week. As is often the case, number 1 team in the nation is North Dakota State. James Madison second, and Weber State is third. Montana now ranks number 4 in the nation. The previous number 4 was South Dakota State, but they lost to Illinois State last week, 27-18. The Illinois State defense forced 4 turnovers in that ballgame for coach Brock Spack.
Well, we've been forcing turnovers on a pretty good pace here the last couple, about a month and a half almost, especially on special teams. I think we have 6 forced turnovers on special teams. That's unheard of. And I haven't gone, you might go years with 6 turnovers off of special teams, and I just have 6 in one season. So we've been very fortunate. Guys have bought in, and turnovers, when I was at Purdue as a coordinator, a defensive coordinator, I had some teams that are really good at turning, forcing turnovers, but the older and more experience you get, the easier that is to do.
Illinois State football coach Brock Spack. The Redbirds are now 7-3, ranked 8th in the FCS poll this week. In Division II football, the Great Lakes Valley Conference and the Great Midwest Conference will hold crossover non-conference football games in weeks 3 and 4 of the 2021 and 2022 seasons. The 2021 games will be played at GLVC schools in week 3 and GMAC schools in week 4. Those sites will reverse in 2022. Schools in each conference will play other non-conference games weeks 1 and 2 and conference games starting in week 5. The agreement will guarantee all schools in each conference at least 9 games per season. The Great Lakes and the Great Midwest also partner this year to hold the America's Crossroads Bowl game at Hobart, Indiana on December 7th. In the NCAA Division III football rankings this week, Mount Union of Ohio ranks number 1, Mary Hardin-Baylor of Texas is 2nd, and Wisconsin-Whitewater 3rd. Central of Iowa moves into the top 25 this week after a big 57-56 overtime win over 7th-ranked Wartburg. Quarterback Blaine Hawkins led Central to a 49-14 lead early in the third quarter.
Coming into the game, our plan in the first half was to just really get after them through the air, especially. We thought our receivers were better than defensive backs, which I think you kind of saw that throughout the first half. I give a lot of credit to our guys up front. They gave me a lot of time to throw, and I know it's not always easy for them to pass protect. They like to get downhill and run block, but they did a great job and gave me a lot of time to make some throws to our best playmakers.
Central of Iowa quarterback Blaine Hawkins. Wartburg scored 35 unanswered points in the second half of that game to force a 49-all tie. Wartburg then scored in overtime to lead 56-49. Central then came back on a 2-yard touchdown run by Hunter Robinson, who then scored on the 2-point conversion to give the win to Central. The Dutch now improved to 8-1 for the season. Rob McCarthy is stepping down as head football coach at Lawrence University after 5 seasons on the job. McCarthy is a former assistant at Concordia of Moorhead, Carleton, and St. Olaf. Lawrence is 1-8 this season and 9-40 in 5 seasons under McCarthy. Lawrence, by the way, has not had a winning season in football since finishing 6-3 in 1987. College student athletes will be able to receive compensation for playing college athletics in coming years through endorsements and sponsorships. Now, this new rule may not have a big impact on the Division III level. However, Wisconsin lacrosse football coach Mike Schmidt is still very eager to see how it works out.
I think on a micro level, it's great. I mean, pay the players and get them a bigger piece of the pie of all the money that's out there. Sounds great. I think on a macro level, it creates a ton of issues that we have to deal with in taxation. You can't just give them money and not be taxed for it. How are they going to work through that as 18-year-old kids, as dependents, as non-dependents? There's a lot of stuff I think that's going to be really interesting to see.
Wisconsin lacrosse football coach Mike Schmidt speaking with WKBT-TV. In the NAIA football rankings this week, top team is Morningside of Iowa. Marion of Indiana ranked number 2. Now, Marion football coach Steve Henninger is keeping a close eye on pro football these days. 2 of his former ball players are now in the NFL. Tight end Brandon Dillon with Minnesota and receiver Krishawn Hogan is with New Orleans.
No, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's tremendous. Obviously, for those guys, just the amount of work that they put in and the way that they developed and, to have the opportunity, just even have the opportunity to, be invited to a camp is just such an honor. And then for those guys to make it into a camp and then perform at a level that they get kept is just, it's unbelievable. And, it's so exciting obviously for them and their families and, 2 just terrific guys, just great people. They were great students, great leaders. I mean, all the things that you want your team and your players to be, those guys embodied all those things.
Marion of Indiana football coach Mark Henninger. Kansas Wesleyan is 3rd in the NAIA football poll for this week. Shaw of North Carolina men's basketball coach Joel Hopkins is stepping down. Hopkins is 126-76 in 2 different stints as head coach at Shaw. He led the Bears to a 17-13 record last season. Associate coach Dominique Stevens will take over the Shaw program this season. That's our small college sports update for this week. I'm Gene DeLisio reporting.
Thank you, Gene, and we'll check in once again next week. When we return, we rejoin John Jenkins and take a look at some of the big games this weekend on College Sports Weekly. And now it is time to get on your thinking caps as John Jenkins will do, the guy who rides in the hobo section of these trains going through the various neighborhoods, including the big neighborhood. And we have him back with us.
I jumped off the train at Orlando and made sure that I was in warm weather. Hey, I am in the big neighborhood of the SEC, Bill. And we've got a big one with Auburn coming up against Georgia this week.
That'll be fun. And Auburn will be hosting big ball game. Georgia trying to position themselves here. They can't lose anymore. Auburn doesn't want to lose anymore.
Hey, I tell you what, the stakes are extremely high here. You know, Georgia's right there on the lip of still surviving in the 4-team playoff. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Gus Malzahn, each and every year he looks down the barrels at Georgia and Alabama. And so, hey, he's got a good football team there at Auburn. But you know what? Things could get real wild real soon if he gets knocked off by Georgia. Mm-hmm. And then Alabama gets him. That'll be finishing up with 2 losses. And, boy, I tell you what, those folks don't put up with that over at Auburn. I'm telling you. So there's some pressure being applied in this game right here. If they can beat Georgia, Auburn can beat Georgia, they're going to knock Georgia plumb out of the playoff situation. Mm-hmm. Alabama will reemerge, but then they've got to play them. So it's, hey, we got some great quality football that the Auburn Tigers are going to be looking at here in the next 2 weeks.
And if you're looking at it from Auburn's perspective, you have a chance to knock 2 teams out of playoff consideration, don't you?
Yeah, 2 years ago, Auburn beats number 1 Georgia. And then the next week, they beat number 1 Alabama. They became number 1 in the country, and they got the rematch in the SEC championship game against Georgia and got the daylights beat out of them. That's when our boys from Central Florida declared themselves self-proclaimed with the governor of Florida as the national champion when they beat Auburn in the bowl game. So hey, you know, once again, Gus Malzahn, he's got a piano on his back here in the next 2 weeks with Georgia and Alabama.
Oh man! Well, here's a traditional ball game which everybody will be keeping an eye on. Michigan State, they're going to the Big House, John. One thing for Michigan this year, although they've struggled, they have a lot of their key matchup games are at home, and this is one of them.
Yeah, you know what? They're coming back feeling good about themselves, but hey, not so fast. If they put those press clippings down in front of Mark D'Antonio's players prematurely, boy, they could get their feelings hurt real quick, because I know that Mark's going to have his guys ready to play. This is a big rival for them. Hey, they've beaten Michigan before, and they would love to get their season, you know, re-energized again with a big win over their in-state rival. They sure would.
Here's one that I would not necessarily put in the win column just yet. Texas hits the road for Iowa State. Jack Trice Stadium in Ames is one of the toughest places to play in the country, and Iowa State has had great success at home, John.
We've talked about Coach Matt Campbell. Oh, gosh, he had that great special in USA Today early in the season, and I'll be dang, it must have been like a jinx, kind of like a Sports Illustrated jinx, where boy, he started losing close games after that, and that was certainly the case this last week. You know, he comes up short against Oklahoma after that great come-from-behind surge right in the end of the game. So, hey, Texas better not think that they're just going to go in there and just have a walk in the park. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's they're going to have to fight their way out of Ames, Iowa, I'm telling you.
If Minnesota is to remain undefeated, they're going to have to pull off a big win on the road, and that is at Iowa. Iowa, of course, is well coached. You mentioned that before. P.J. Fleck right now is in the running for Coach of the Year, the way that Minnesota team is playing.
Now he's got the inside track for Coach Jinx right here and Wild Bill. He's got the baton on the inside track. I tell you what, we have acknowledged everybody, Sonny Dax and Matt Campbell earlier. And I tell you what, Coach Fleck, my gosh, what a great job he's done. He really does some unique things with motivating his players. And, and as I mentioned previously, the job he does preparing his guys and the talent that he has gotten in recruiting, I tell you what, they're going to declare themselves once again. This is going to be really interesting seeing how they're going to finish up the season here.
All right, here we have one. This is close to your heart, John. LSU and Ole Miss.
Hey, what a historic game this is. There's not so much glitz and sizzle on this one this year. LSU now, boy, what a great season. And, of course, Ole Miss is still staggering and doing figure eights out in the middle of the street because of the severe probation that's been handed down from them. Matt Luke has done as good a job as he could do trying to gather and salvage what he can. But LSU is going to succumb. They're going to really batter Ole Miss around. Let me tell all our listeners about a little history between these two. Back in the day when good old Coach Johnny Vaught was at Ole Miss, and LSU had a run, particularly with Heisman Trophy winner Billy Cannon. It was on Thanksgiving night in the late 1950s when LSU's Billy Cannon ran a punt back late in the game that secured the national title for LSU. That game continues to be highlighted throughout the big neighborhood of the SEC and the big in the South, in Louisiana, in Mississippi. Each and every year they talk about that game. Poor old Billy Cannon, years later, got into some trouble manufacturing counterfeit money down in Louisiana and had to spend some hard time. The story going around when that occurred, they said he would have never been caught. He would have never been caught if he would have just printed the money out properly that said on the back, "In God We Trust." Instead, he put, "Go to hell, Ole Miss." And they caught him and sent him to the penitentiary.
Well, that'll do it, all right. And John, we have one other ball game that was played on Wednesday night. The Barbed Wire Boys of Northern Illinois went into Toledo and they conquered the Glass Bowl Jinx. Now, we've seen teams go in there and leave with their tail between their legs, including major Power 5 teams. We saw it again this year, and Northern Illinois got out of there with a 31-28 win.
Well, I tell you, you're right. You're right. Hey, what a big win. What a big signature win. And, you're right. One of my great memories is seeing Joe Paterno set up there in a post-game conference and trying to explain what a great football team Toledo was after whipping his butt one day. So, hey, this was a big-time win for our guys at Northern Illinois.
I should always mention that anytime I mention the Glass Bowl, we're going to hear about Joe. I'm
not going to let that one go. I'm not going to let that one go. Oh, no way.
Oh,
hey,
brother.
Bill, you know what? We want to sure acknowledge Matt Rule down there at Baylor. He has quietly been laying in the weeds all year, going about his business, winning games, gut-wrenching finishes. He's going to have another one as he goes and plays Oklahoma this week. I talked to my good buddy Grant Teff, long time. Talked to him a couple days ago. Grant's doing real well. He had a little surgery on one of his arteries, and he's feeling good again. And certainly he's going to make the trip and see the game there in Oklahoma. Now, we said P.J. Fleck has got the baton on the inside lane. In lane 2 comes Matt Rule right now, Coach of the Year. So
yeah, you're right.
We're going to see how this finishes up.
Yeah, you are right about that. And as for Coach, legendary coach at Baylor, if you had eaten as many worms as he had, you'd need surgery too. Of course, we all know the story about that with Grant.
You know what? I need to remind him of that. That's probably where all that occurred.
That's right.
That's probably where all those problems started.
That's right. And started eating those worms. That was where he got into trouble. Oh, John, always a pleasure. You have fun down there. Get some sun for me, will you?
Oh, I'll do that. Bill. I'll be real tan I'll just really, really make you jealous here.
Boy,
I'll send some pictures to you.
You really know how to hurt a guy, don't you? You sure do. Oh, man. No mercy, ladies and gentlemen. Coming from the High Plains drifter of college football himself, John Jenkins. We will be back with more of College Sports Weekly. Time to head for home. Full implementation of 5G cellular phone service is just weeks away. Who is going to do it? The story next week. And now let's introduce our team. The executive producer is Keith Haney. Coordinating producer Bo Carter. Small college editor Gene DeLisio. And a special thanks to sports information officers throughout the country for their contributions to this program. Now, this is Bill Hazen saying thanks for being with us. Be sure to tell your friends about us. And we'll see you next week on College Sports Weekly.